I'm Aaron. I'm 25, work in IT, and live alone in a one-bedroom apartment just outside the city. It's the kind of place where the microwave hum is the loudest thing at night. And I like it that way. My life's not exactly exciting, but I never aim for exciting. I like routine, predictable, low stress, drama-free. That's how I keep it. At work, I mostly keep to myself. I'm good at what I do, but I don't go around making noise about it. We've got a bunch of loud personalities on our floor, so it's easy to get lost in the shuffle. And honestly, I prefer it that way. Then this new guy started, Nate, younger than me, 21, fresh out of school, full of energy I thought I'd grown out of. He cracked jokes in meetings, teased the office manager, wore loud sneakers, and somehow got away with it. I figured I'd ignore him like I ignored most of them, but he started hanging around near my desk, asking about my playlist, about basketball, random stuff. He was just easy to talk to. Before I knew it, we were grabbing lunch together a couple times a week, talking music, sports, dumb stories about terrible dates. We clicked. One Friday as we were packing up, he said, "Hey, you ever had my mom's lasagna?" I gave him a look. "Why would I have had your mom's lasagna?" He laughed. "Exactly. You've been missing out. She's cooking tonight. Come over." No excuses. I hesitated for a second. Wasn't really used to going over to coworkers' places, but he was insistent in that casual way of his. "Come on," he added, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. "She loves feeding people. You'll thank me." So I said yes. He lived about 20 minutes away in a quiet neighborhood full of trees and tidy lawns. The house stood out right away. Clean porch, flowers in pots, wind chimes. The kind of house that looks like it's looked after every day. Not fancy, just cared for. We got out of the car and walked up the steps. Nate opened the door, shouting something inside like, "We're here, Rittner," and I followed him in. That's when I saw her. She came into the hallway drying her hands on a towel, her posture relaxed, confident, like she owned every square inch of her space, and probably did. "You must be Aaron," she said with a smile that hit just a little harder than expected. "Yeah," I said, catching myself before I sounded too much like a deer in headlights. "Thanks for having me." "I'm Marissa," she said. Nate's mom, obviously, but she didn't look like how I imagined a coworker's mom, not even close. She was probably in her early 40s, but moved like someone 10 years younger. Not just how she looked, which was striking, but how she held herself. Charisma, that's the word. Her voice, her posture, the way her eyes held yours half a second longer than most people do. It didn't feel like I was meeting Nate's mom. It felt like I was meeting someone important. She led us into the kitchen, and it was the kind of cozy space that smelled like fresh basil, garlic, and something warm baking in the oven. Candles flickered on the counter. Real candles, not those fake LED things. Nate grabbed drinks, opened a cabinet like he lived there, which he did, and I sat at the table. Marissa moved around the kitchen like she'd done it 1,000 times, never rushed. She chatted, laughed at Nate's nonsense, threw in a couple of sharp, funny comments that made me laugh more than I expected. At some point, I realized I was watching her more than I should have been, and that she knew it. There was this flicker in her eyes every time I looked up, like she was aware of being watched. We all sat down together, passing dishes and cracking jokes. It felt easy, natural, but there was something under the surface. Maybe I imagined it, maybe not. A couple of times our eyes met for no reason, just a glance that should have lasted a second but lasted a little longer. She asked questions, the kind that didn't feel like small talk. "Do you live alone? What kind of music do you play when you are working?" Stuff that makes you wonder why she wants to know. At one point, Nate got up to check something on his phone in the living room, and I caught myself looking at her again. That's when I said, without even thinking, "You look great, by the way." She paused, not shocked, just surprised I said it out loud. Then she smiled again, slower this time. "That's sweet of you," she said, her voice low. "Just for me?" She didn't look away. Nate came back in, breaking the silence with some dumb meme, and dinner carried on like nothing happened. But that night, even after I got home, even lying in bed in my tiny, quiet apartment, I kept replaying the look in her eyes when she smiled at me. It wasn't the dinner I'd expected, and I had the strange, creeping feeling that I just stepped into something I didn't understand yet. I didn't expect to be invited back so soon, but the next Monday, Nate nudged me at lunch and said, "Mom asked if you liked the lasagna, said she made too much again, and wants to know if you're coming over Friday." I tried to play it cool. "Yeah, she cooks like that often?" He laughed. "Dude, she lives to feed people. If you say yes once, she takes it as a lifelong commitment." I just nodded. I mean, yeah, sure, why not? But of course I knew why. Friday came fast, and this time I didn't hesitate. I brought a bottle of wine, not fancy, just something that looked like I put in effort. When I rang the bell, it was Marissa who opened the door again. Same warmth in her eyes, same confident smile. She wore a soft black sweater, jeans, hair tied back just loosely enough to look effortless. I didn't even step inside before she said, "You didn't have to bring anything." "Felt right," I said, holding it up. "Well," she said, taking it, "now I'm impressed." Nate was in the kitchen already, complaining about something at work while music played low in the background. Older stuff, soul and jazz. Not what I expected, but it made the room feel like its own little world. Dinner was different this time. Last week had that new, slightly awkward energy of first impressions. This time it was smoother, easier. Nate carried the conversation like always with stories that mostly involved someone doing something ridiculous. I laughed genuinely, but I kept noticing how Marissa reacted. She laughed too, sure, but sometimes her glance would drift across the table to me and stay there. She had this way of listening to Nate and watching me at the same time, like she was balancing both worlds without effort. Her smile would widen just a little when I laughed. Her eyes would linger on mine a second longer when she passed the bread. Her hand would brush mine lightly when clearing a plate, and it never felt accidental. And then there were her questions. "So Aaron," she said mid-dinner, "do you cook, or are you a takeout every night kind of guy?" I smirked. "Takeout 3 nights, cereal the rest." She laughed. "At least you're honest." A little later, "You always this quiet or just when you're not working?" I shrugged. "I guess I'm more of a listen first kind of person." "I like that," she said. "There aren't enough listeners." Nate didn't seem to notice anything. He was too busy going on about his fantasy football picks or debating music trivia. But I noticed every look, every touch, every question that went a little deeper than it had to. She asked about my apartment, what I did in my free time, what kind of shows I watched, what kind of women I liked. She smiled after that last one and took a sip of wine, not saying anything else. I excused myself after dessert to wash my hands and ended up staring at myself in the bathroom mirror for a second too long. I looked like myself, same as ever, but something had changed. I could feel it in my chest, like I was standing at the edge of something and didn't know whether to lean forward or back away. When I walked back into the kitchen, she was alone, stacking plates, rinsing dishes. Nate had gone to his room to take a call. "You don't have to help," she said, noticing me. "I don't mind." I stepped beside her, drying the dishes she rinsed. It was quiet except for the running water and the occasional clink of glass. Our arms moved in rhythm, side by side, close enough to feel the heat of her skin. Then she said without looking at me, "You really have a calm energy about you. It's rare." I looked over at her. "You make it easy." That made her smile. She turned to face me, plate in hand, water dripping from her fingertips. "Careful," she said, voice a little softer. That almost sounded like a compliment. "Maybe it was," I said, meeting her eyes. She didn't blink. "Well then, thank you." We didn't say anything else. Nate came back out, still talking about some weekend plans, and the spell broke. But when I left that night, when she hugged me briefly at the door, hand resting on my back just a little longer than it needed to, I knew it wasn't in my head. There was something there, a spark, and it wasn't going away anytime soon. After that second dinner, I found myself making excuses to stop by Nate's desk, to text him first, to ask what he was doing this weekend. It wasn't just about hanging out. It was about seeing if I'd get another invite. I didn't have to wait long. Midweek, Nate mentioned casually, "Mom's making that lemon chicken thing she does. Seriously, you should come over Thursday." I nodded like it was no big deal. Yeah, sounds good, but I thought about it all day. When I showed up that evening, it was already dark out. Marissa answered the door again, this time barefoot in a loose tee and soft joggers, like she hadn't dressed up for company, which somehow made it even more personal. Like I wasn't just a guest, like I was becoming part of the rhythm of the house. Nate was upstairs finishing something for work. She led me into the kitchen with a smile. He'll be down in a few. Want coffee while you wait? Sure, I said. She already knew how I took it. I didn't even have to ask. 2 sugars, splash of oat milk. She handed me the mug, fingers grazing mine like it meant nothing. But it did. It started being like that, small things. She remembered what shows I mentioned I was watching. She asked how my Monday meeting went, even though I hadn't told her I had one. Nate must have mentioned it offhand. She noticed when I'd gotten a haircut, complimented the jacket I wore, always with a calm smile, eyes steady, voice soft, and she touched my arm when she laughed. Not in a loud, obvious way, just a gentle, momentary contact. But it was enough to leave a trail of warmth long after she let go. Once I came by with Nate after a weekend basketball game. We were both sweaty and half laughing from a ridiculous play we messed up. Marissa opened the door, eyebrows raised. You two smell like a locker room. I grinned. We earned it. She handed us both cold water bottles, then looked at me and said, still handsome under all that sweat. Impressive. It was quick, light. Nate didn't even catch it, but I did. I started noticing her perfume, soft, clean, always the same. It lingered in the air after she walked past, and sometimes I'd catch myself remembering it when I wasn't even at the house. One Saturday afternoon, I came by while Nate was out grabbing snacks for some game night we were doing. Marissa opened the door like she was expecting me. Anyway, you're here, she said with a smile. Nate's still out? Yeah, but come in. I could use a hand. She led me to the living room where she was untangling some mess of cords behind the TV. I was trying to fix the sound bar, but I think I've only made it worse. I knelt beside her and started working through the mess. She sat nearby, sipping tea, watching me. It was quiet, comfortable. You always this helpful? She asked. I shrugged. You always this good at pretending you're not flirting? Her eyebrows lifted, then she laughed, a soft, almost private sound. What makes you think I'm pretending? She said it like a joke, but not really. I didn't reply, just kept working. Heartbeat a little faster. Eventually, Nate came back in, loud as ever, dumping chips and soda on the table. I moved to the kitchen with him, but my mind was still in that quiet space behind the TV, where her knee had been almost touching mine. That night, I found myself scrolling through our text history, not Nate's, but hers. It wasn't long, just a few short messages. Dinner's at 6, bring an appetite. Do you want that coffee again? Tell Nate I said thanks for fixing the speaker, even though I know it was really you. None of them were flirty on their own, but together they felt like something more. I'd never crossed any lines, not yet, but we were both standing close to them, close enough to know they were there, and the truth was I didn't want to step back. The moment came on a day that started out totally normal. I wasn't even supposed to be there. Nate had gone out of town for a wedding, some cousin somewhere in Austin, and I'd planned to spend the weekend catching up on sleep, clearing out my inbox, maybe ordering bad Thai food and binging a series I'd probably forget by next week. Then Marissa texted me. Just one line. I made too much food again. You around? I stared at it for a while. I knew what I walking into, or at least I thought I did. But the moment I replied sure, I also knew that whatever had been building between us wasn't going to stay under the surface much longer. She opened the door with a soft smile, barefoot again, hair loose around her shoulders. She wore a navy tank top and soft cotton pants. Nothing fancy, but she looked incredible, comfortable, effortlessly put together in a way that made the room around her feel smaller. It's just us tonight, she said. I hope that's okay. I nodded. More leftovers for me. We laughed and it helped to ease the weight sitting in my chest. But even as we joked, I felt it. The closeness, the unspoken question hanging between us. Dinner was simple. Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, a glass of white wine. We sat across from each other at the kitchen island. Music played low in the background. She asked about my week. I asked about hers, but everything we said felt like a placeholder for what we weren't saying. After we cleared the dishes, she poured a second glass and motioned toward the couch. Come sit. I never get company when the house is this quiet. So I did. She sat beside me, closer than usual, not touching but not far either. Her foot brushed mine once lightly, then didn't move. We talked for a while about Nate, work, random things, but there were long pauses between our sentences now. Comfortable ones. Familiar. Then she turned to me. You're different, she said. I don't mean age, just different. I looked at her. So are you. She smiled just a little. With you, I feel younger. Not just in the mirror. I mean, I laugh more. I remember things I used to care about. I didn't know what to say at first. I just held her gaze. I think about you, she added, almost like she hadn't planned to say it. I didn't hesitate this time. I think about you too. She leaned back into the cushions, eyes still on mine. That's the problem, isn't it? Maybe, I said quietly, but it doesn't feel wrong. She reached up and brushed a piece of hair from her face. Then her fingers grazed my cheek, soft and slow, and for a moment we both sat completely still. That silence said everything. I leaned in. Our lips met gently at first, not rushed, not dramatic, just enough to acknowledge what had been simmering for weeks. Her hand cupped the back of my neck. Mine rested on her thigh. Her lips were warm, familiar somehow, like I'd already kissed her 100 times in my head. When we finally pulled apart, she looked at me with something unreadable in her expression. I shouldn't have done that, she whispered, but she didn't move away. Do you regret it? I asked. No, she said, not even a little. The room felt different after that, like it belonged to us now, like some invisible barrier had finally fallen. We didn't rush into anything else. We didn't even kiss again that night. We just sat close, her head resting on my shoulder, silence wrapping around us like a soft blanket. It was calm, real. Before I left, she walked me to the door. Her fingers brushed mine again as she handed me my jacket. Be careful, she said softly. I will. And Aaron. Yeah, her voice dropped. This doesn't have to be just one night. I nodded. I know. After that kiss, nothing looked the same. The way I thought about her, the way I felt walking into work Monday morning, even the way I looked at my phone, half expecting a message from her, half hoping I'd see her name light up the screen. But she didn't text, and neither did I. 3 days passed, long ones. I kept going over it in my head, what we'd said, what we didn't say, that kiss, her hand on my face, the way she looked at me afterward, like she'd finally stopped pretending. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't cold. It just lingered. Then Thursday evening, just as I was walking out of the office, I got a message from her. Dinner tomorrow, just us. 7 p.m., no emoji, no explanation, just that. I replied immediately, I'll be there. I barely slept that night. Friday dragged. I couldn't focus at work. I left early under the excuse of a dentist appointment, but really I just needed time to breathe, to shower twice, to change my shirt 3 times before finally settling on something that didn't scream. I overthought this. When I pulled into her driveway, it was just getting dark. The porch light was on. The front door opened before I could even knock. She stood there in a simple black dress, soft and flowing, her hair loosely curled, no shoes. Her smile was calm, but her eyes held something else, a quiet tension. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I was sure, I replied. She stepped back, letting me in. The house smelled faintly of rosemary and something baked, maybe bread, maybe roasted vegetables. Music played low from the other room, something older again, familiar, soft. Wine, she asked, already reaching for 2 glasses. Please. We sat at the table, just the 2 of us. The food was good, but I couldn't tell you what it was. I was too focused on the curve of her mouth when she laughed. The way she sat with one leg tucked under her, casual and open, the way her hands sometimes touched her neck when she listened to me talk. It didn't feel like a first date. It felt like something that had been waiting to happen. At one point, I said, "You look beautiful tonight." She looked at me for a long second, then reached out and touched my hand gently. So do you. M.O. Neither of us moved for a while. We just sat there holding that contact like it was enough for now. Eventually, she stood up, taking our empty glasses, setting them by the sink. Then she turned around, leaned against the counter, and said quietly, "I've been thinking about last weekend." "So have I." She tilted her head slightly. "Do you think we crossed a line?" "Maybe," I said, "but I don't think we did it by accident." That made her smile, slow, thoughtful. She pushed off the counter and walked toward me, stopping when she was just close enough to touch. Her fingers found mine again. "Come here," she said softly. She led me to the living room where the lights were dim and the couch looked more inviting than ever. But we didn't sit. She turned to face me, standing close now. Then she kissed me again, not like the first time, tentative and cautious. This one had weight, memory, intention. I kissed her back, my hands finding her waist, then her back. She leaned into me slowly, naturally, like this had been rehearsed in silence. We moved toward the bedroom without speaking, each step unspoken but mutual. Inside, the air was still. Her room was warm, simple but feminine in its own quiet way. Soft lighting, clean sheets, faint scent of lavender. What happened next wasn't rushed. It wasn't fire or chaos. It was quiet, careful, like we both knew how fragile this was and didn't want to break it by moving too fast. Her hands on my chest, my fingers brushing her shoulder, her breath against my neck. A series of small, unspoken moments, strung together with care. There was no need for words, no declarations, just the soft sound of skin, fabric, breath. Later, after the warmth settled, we lay still for a while. I didn't expect her to say anything, but she did. "I don't usually do this," she murmured. I turned my head. "I know." She looked at me, eyes tired but open. "But I don't regret it." I reached for her hand under the blanket. "Neither do I." Outside, wind moved through the trees. Inside, we stayed wrapped in the stillness. Two people who had stepped across a line and now shared something no one else could see. Something we hadn't planned. Something we didn't want to end. After that night, things didn't go back to normal. They couldn't. But we didn't talk about it much, not directly, not the next morning when I slipped quietly out the front door just after sunrise, not the next time I saw her, which came sooner than expected. It started with a message. "He's out until 9 if you're free." That was it. Simple. But I knew exactly what she meant. The next hour, I was in her kitchen again, pretending not to be nervous as I leaned against the counter. She handed me coffee like it was any other day, but there was something in the way her fingers curled around mine for a second too long. That soft smile that said we were both pretending it was casual, even though neither of us believed it. We made rules without saying them out loud. We didn't talk about Nate when we were alone. We didn't bring up the future. And we definitely didn't act like anything had changed when he was around. But it had. We started to fall into a rhythm, a quiet one. I'd show up when I knew Nate wouldn't be home, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the early afternoon if he was out running errands. Marissa would greet me with that same calm confidence. But now there was something softer underneath, something more vulnerable. We'd sit close on the couch, wine glasses in hand, talking about everything and nothing. I started to learn her habits. How she always added a slice of lemon to her water. How she lit candles even during the day. How she hummed when she was thinking, but didn't realize it. We weren't rushing anymore. The first time had been about tension, weeks of glance and silence breaking all at once. Now it was something else, something quieter, slower. There was a night, just a week after that first one, when we met again while Nate was out at a concert. She opened the door with a knowing look. Didn't say much, just pulled me inside. We didn't even go upstairs right away. We sat at the kitchen table. I watched her sip wine and tuck her feet up on the chair. We talked about her college years, her travels, the years she spent juggling 2 jobs after her divorce. She didn't sugarcoat any of it. I just listened. "I don't feel lonely when you're here," she said almost to herself. I looked at her. "I don't feel lost when I'm with you." That night was different. There was no rush, just slow, careful movements. Her touch was gentle, mine a little more sure. It wasn't just desire anymore. It was something warmer, like we'd found a version of ourselves that only existed in each other's company. The house felt more alive when I was there. So did she. And me, I felt seen. It's strange how quickly something secret can start to feel real, like its own little world hidden in plain sight. We started to recognize our own patterns. Her text tone on my phone made my chest jump. I kept a spare shirt in my car just in case. I learned which nights Nate had class or plans, and she started leaving the door unlocked for me on those evenings. Every time I was there, we moved like people who knew this was borrowed time, but couldn't help stealing more of it. The spaces we used together started to feel ours. The couch where we watched shows we never finished. The kitchen where she'd lean back against the counter and pull me in by my shirt. The bedroom, quiet and still, where her voice would fall to a whisper and my hand would find hers in the dark. We never said the word relationship. It didn't need a label. We weren't planning anything. We were just in it. But the more I stayed, the harder it became to leave. One night, after another long evening wrapped in conversation and warmth, she rested her head on my chest and said, "Sometimes I forget we're hiding." I nodded slowly. "Sometimes I forget we're not supposed to be." She closed her eyes. Outside, the world went on. Cars passing, lights flickering. The quiet hum of a suburban street that had no idea what was unfolding behind the curtains. But inside, we were building something no one else could touch. And maybe that was enough for now. It was bound to happen eventually. We were careful, really careful, but no matter how many precautions we took, how silent the texts, how quick the glances, eventually someone always starts to notice. In our case, it was Nate. It started with a joke. We were sitting in the break room at work, sharing lunch and swapping dumb YouTube videos. Out of nowhere, he smirked and said, "You spend more time at my house than I do, man." I laughed, probably too fast. "Yeah, your mom feeds me better than my fridge does." He rolled his eyes. "Fair. She's adopted you or something." I kept it light, kept my head down, but his tone stuck with me. Not suspicious, not yet, but aware. He was noticing something, and that was enough to set my nerves on edge. The next time I went over, I told Marissa. He made a joke about me being there too much. She froze mid-step, wine glass in hand. What kind of joke? "Just observant, nothing serious, but we should be careful." She nodded slowly, setting the glass down. "We've been careful." I didn't say it out loud, but I think we both knew the truth. Maybe we'd gotten comfortable. Maybe we'd started to believe we were invisible. We pulled back slightly. Fewer visits, shorter stays, less time tangled up in each other. But the distance didn't help. It only made the craving worse. There was one night Nate said he'd be out late, a group thing, dinner, and a movie. I waited until his car was gone before driving over. Headlights off, parking a little farther down the street just in case. Marissa opened the door the second I knocked. She didn't speak, just pulled me in and kissed me like she hadn't seen me in weeks, even though it had only been 4 days. We ended up in the living room, clinging to each other like we were running out of time. It wasn't fast. It wasn't wild. It was quiet, almost desperate. Her hand gripping mine, her forehead resting against mine after. She whispered, "I hate that this feels wrong when it doesn't." I kissed her shoulder. "It's not wrong, it's just complicated." After, we lay there under a blanket on the couch, the house dim and silent, her fingers tracing slow circles on my chest. I could feel her thoughts racing beneath the stillness. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Nate. "Hey, plans changed. Be home in 10. I sat up like I'd been shocked. Marissa's eyes widened. "Go." I was already grabbing my jacket, slipping my shoes on in the dark. No time for long goodbyes, no time to fix the pillows or check for stray signs. I kissed her once, fast but firm, and slipped out the back door. I was halfway down the street when I saw Nate's headlights rounding the corner. I kept walking, casual but quick, phone to my ear like I was mid-conversation. He drove past without slowing down. That night, neither of us slept. She texted me later. "I think he knows." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "I can't stop." I meant it. I tried to stay away. I tried to keep things at a safe distance, but every time I was near her, something pulled me in like gravity, and the more risk there was, the stronger it got. We didn't stop. We met again the next week. Another quiet night, Another moment behind locked doors with the lights low and our voices even lower. It was different this time, softer, slower. We didn't say much. We just held each other longer, kissed more gently, like we both knew what we were risking now. Afterwards, she ran her fingers through my hair and said quietly, "If it ends, I don't think I'll know how to go back to what life was before." I looked at her, steady. "It's not ending." She didn't answer, but her hand didn't let go of mine for the rest of the night. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was our answer for now. Somehow, we made it work. Not easily, not without effort, but we found a way to exist between the cracks, between what people saw and what we knew. To everyone else, I was just Aaron, Nate's friend, the guy who came over for dinner sometimes, hung around on weekends, helped fix the TV when it glitched. But to her, to Marissa, I was something different, something real. We didn't use big words, we didn't label it, but we both knew it. It became a rhythm. I'd text her a subtle and she'd reply with a time. I'd knock once quietly, and she'd open the door with that same calm smile, always looking like she'd been waiting, even if she hadn't said it. Sometimes we only had an hour. Sometimes we had all night. It wasn't just about physical moments anymore. It was everything around them. The way she'd pull me into the kitchen while something simmered on the stove, the way I'd rub her shoulders while she sat reading emails late at night, the way we talked about things we didn't talk about with anyone else. Quiet fears, long memories, little regrets. We gotten good at speaking in code. At dinners with Nate, I knew how to smile just enough without overdoing it. She'd ask me to pass the salt, and our fingers would touch for a second too long. When I talked, she listened, really listened, but her eyes never gave anything away. It was exhausting sometimes, keeping the lines so clean on the outside while crossing every single one of them behind closed doors. But it was also addictive. We knew what we were doing, and we knew what it meant. There was a night near the end of summer, warm air drifting through the windows, soft music playing in the background when I came over after Nate had left for the weekend. No rush, no fear, just time. She met me at the door, barefoot and smiling. We didn't speak much. We just settled into the night like it was ours. Dinner turned into wine. Wine turned into quiet touches. And later, when we lay tangled in her bed, she turned her head toward me and whispered, "You've changed me." I looked at her. "How?" "I used to go days without laughing," she said. "Now it happens without me trying." I ran a thumb across her cheek. "You make me feel like I matter." She didn't say anything for a while after that. She just rested her head on my chest and stayed there. That night wasn't about fire. It was about something warmer, something safe. We moved together like people who had done this not just once or twice, but deeply, meaningfully. Her fingertips tracing my back, my lips at her shoulder, every movement slow, tender, familiar. The next morning, I made coffee before she could. She walked into the kitchen half asleep, wrapped in a robe, hair messy. She smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world, and for a few quiet minutes it was. We didn't talk about what came next. We didn't make plans, but we both knew we'd protect this however we could, for as long as we could. And in between the ordinary days, the passing conversations, the casual smiles in front of others, we kept our world alive with small, hidden things. A text that just said, "Thinking of you." A glance that held just a second longer than it should. A scent that lingered after I left, tucked into my collar or clinging to my skin. Sometimes I drove home late at night, windows down, music low, thinking about how close it had all come to falling apart. But it hadn't. We were still here, still choosing each other, still carrying this secret between us like a quiet flame, flickering, fragile, but still burning. She once told me, "I don't feel lonely anymore." And I said, "I don't feel lost anymore." Maybe that was all we needed. Not forever, not certainty, just the space between our hidden world and whatever time it had left. Imagine, if you will, the quiet thrill of discovering a bond that awakens parts of yourself you thought were dormant. Aaron, content in his solitary existence, steps into Marissa's world and finds not just attraction, but a sense of being truly seen, a rare gift in our fast-paced, surface-level interactions. Yet, their story isn't without shadows. The secrecy, the near misses, the emotional tightrope they walk highlight the bittersweet truth that love often blooms in the most complicated soils. What might this teach us about life's impermanence? That happiness isn't always found in grand plans or societal approvals, but in those stolen moments where we choose authenticity over fear. Feel the weight of their whispers in the dark, the lingering touches that speak volumes unspoken. Doesn't it evoke a deep ache for connection, reminding us that we're all navigating hidden worlds within our visible ones? And what of the risks they take? By holding on to their flame despite the odds, they illustrate that regret often stems not from bold actions, but from opportunities ignored. In real life, how many of us have hesitated at the edge of something transformative, only to wonder what if? This story stirs the soul, urging us to cherish fleeting joys, to listen to our inner longings, and to recognize that even fragile bonds can redefine our sense of belonging. It's a poignant reminder. Life rewards those who dare to feel deeply, even when the path is uncertain. Now turn your thoughts inward. What resonates most with you in this tale? Have you ever pursued a connection that defied expectations or held back from one that could have changed everything? Share your reflections in the comments below. Your stories might inspire others just as this one has. If this moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Let's explore more life lessons together. Your voice matters here. Let's keep the conversation going.